Take a look at this engine. Looks pretty good, right? Now, let's take off its cam cover. Now, what are we looking at? Oh well, I don't know. Let's look at this engine. Maybe that will answer some questions. Oh well, they look nothing like each other. But why? Well, see, this one is an overhead valve engine, also known as a pushrod engine. Okay, so what's that? The camshaft is near the crankshaft, connected via a gear. The camshaft pushes on these rockers, which go up into the head. They push on these rockers, which push onto the valves, opening them. The overhead valve is also the oldest and the simplest of the bunch. But how could it be the simplest when there are so many moving parts? Well, yes, there are many moving parts, but they are easy to make and maintain. For starters, the camshaft is placed at the bottom, closer to the oil sump. That makes oiling it way simpler, and in splash lubricated engines, it's the only choice. The rockers don't need much oil or tight tolerances, as they rotate only a few degrees at a time. A part that's really important, but most people ignore it, is the gap between the rockers or the cam lobes and the valve itself. Metal expands, so we need a tight gap set between the rockers and the valves so they don't seize together. This gap is easy to set on this design with only an adjustment of a few nuts and a shim. But why is the overhead valve design the oldest and the simplest? Why haven't we done the obvious? Place the cam on top of the valves? That makes more sense, right? Well, that came later on, chronologically, and it's called the single overhead cam design. The single overhead cam does the obvious, moves the cam on top. Let's see the pros of this design. Most obviously, the weight has been lowered without any flimsy push rods, allowing for higher RPM, thus more power. We still use rockers as they are really easy to set up. We can actuate up to 3 valves with only one camshaft. Much less seen is using buckets. No, not these. Buckets allow us to do the obvious, place the cam on top of the valves. To set the clearance, we use shims. They can be over the bucket for easier access or under for higher RPM. So with buckets, we have reduced the mass a lot and made it simpler. So why aren't we using it? What's the catch? The obvious one is that the buckets need to be guided down. There could be no pivot. This will increase the cost since now we need to lubricate the buckets and guide them, increasing cost and complexity. Since now we need more oil galleries to deliver the oil and tight tolerances around the buckets. There are also rubber seals on the valves now to block oil from going to the intake or the exhaust, preventing the engine from burning oil. It makes no financial sense to use buckets on a single overhead cam design, as rockers allow us to actuate more valves with a single cam. Now we come back to the original engine we looked at the start of the video. This is a Yamaha R6 engine. It's a straight 4-cylinder, and this thing can rev up to 16,000 RPM and over. Mind you, normal cars redline at about 6,000 RPM. To achieve such massive revs, it uses 4 valves per cylinder. To actuate so many valves, it uses a dual overhead cam setup. So what does that mean? Dual overhead cam, you just use 2 valves? Oh well, yes, it uses 2 camshafts and buckets. We already talked about the bucket part, but now we need to encounter a big problem: packaging. Until now, we could comfortably fit everything, but now the cams are right above the valves and the head bolts. I think you can see how this part can become a big problem. This space needs to be large enough so we can fit the sockets and the tools needed to torque down the head bolts. But we have the journals and the bucket guides and the oil galleries in the way. So you can see how this is becoming more of a bigger and bigger problem. That's why these bolts go through the journals themselves. Packaging becomes really difficult. So is this it? We have overhead valve design, single overhead cam and dual overhead cam design. These are all the ways, but you may see versions of the dual overhead cam design using rockers to reduce friction, or VVL, also known as variable valve lift, such as the VTEC in Honda engines. And all these are just modifications to the classical dual overhead cam design. At the end of the day, the actuation type is a sacrifice and a negotiation with physics. Modern vehicles use dual overhead cams as it allows for variable valve lift and VVT, variable valve timing, which is the key to modern emission standards and to unlock more power and torque at lower revs, making the engine more practical.